The Tom Woods Show, episode 1968.
Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Hey folks, don't even think about missing the libertarian event of the year, the 2000th episode of The Tom Woods Show, live in Orlando, featuring many of your favorites from The Tom Woods Show. And Michael Malice says his special surprise guest, whose identity I myself don't even know, will bring the house down. Cost nothing to attend. Register at tomwoods2000.com. Hey folks, Tom Woods here. We are approaching very quickly, as I record this, the 20th anniversary of the September 11th, 2001 attacks. And although I don't necessarily feel like a slave to these anniversaries, I think in this case, we're dealing with something so important that I have planned an episode for that. September 11th is actually a Saturday this year. And since I release these episodes Monday through Friday, I'm going to be doing my 9/11 episode tomorrow, and I'll have joining me, I know you're thinking Scott Horton, that's too predictable. I'm having Daniel McAdams of the Ron Paul Institute, and we're going to talk, of course, about 9/11 and the aftermath, but he was just joining Ron Paul's office, congressional office, as an advisor, and I want to talk about what that was like and working for him and so on and so forth. So it's going to be a good episode. Today, I want to review some news items. A couple of things I've put in my newsletter I want to amplify, but I want to just go over what's been going on. And unfortunately, the Joe Biden remarks today about what his 6-point plan is for controlling the virus is going to happen after I finish this episode. There's nothing I can do about that. One thing I can know, however, before hearing a word Biden says, is that absolutely nothing he proposes is going to do a darn thing. We all know that. Any fool knows that there's nothing he's going to be able to do to control the virus. That this is, I think, obvious after all these months, realizing that this is all futile, that the efforts they've made don't work. They clearly don't work. And the key way you can tell they don't work is that you can't tell the difference between places that do them and places that don't. I happen to think that the best graph, there are a lot of them at covidchartsquiz.com. I think the best one is the one maybe a couple of months after Iowa got rid of its state level restrictions in early February. And then we've got a chart showing, I can't remember if it's deaths or hospitalizations or what. But we're showing this chart of the Midwest. Now, Iowa is the state with the fewest restrictions at that time. And the object of this particular question in the quiz is to pick out Iowa based on the chart, looking at all the lines representing the numbers for all the various Midwestern states, pick out which one Iowa is. I mean, surely if these things work, then Iowa, by defying them, should have numbers that are just skyrocketing. It should be an unbelievable outlier that should be easy for us to pick out. But of course, all the lines are exactly the same. Nobody among the lizard people seems to find this anything worth investigating. And not one of them is curious about it. The reporter who wrote, I haven't got the name offhand, but I'm sure you could find it with a quick search in a search engine. But there was a reporter who wrote an article for the Washington Post right around the time that Iowa did this, referring to Iowa as the state that doesn't care if you live or die. And by the way, at this point, I really don't want the state to care whether I live or die, to be perfectly honest with you, in the sense that, for example, I don't want private institutions to keep telling me that my health is their top priority. Please stop making my health your top priority, okay? Because it never actually has anything to do with my health. But please stop that, because it always means ridiculous masking rules or whatever crazy theater they want to do. I really don't want you to, don't worry about it. I'll keep an eye on my health. Okay. And I'll make the decisions I need to make. I really don't want you guys doing that. You businesses. I don't want you to make my health your top priority. You've done enough of that. And likewise, I would be perfectly happy with a state that just left me alone to make my own decisions and didn't constantly badger me. But anyway, so she used this headline, and the numbers just fell precipitously ever since. That's what's been happening in Iowa. And there's been no apology, no retraction, no revisiting of it, just left it there. And she's still hysterically on to the next thing. We have to mask the kids in school. And not for a moment has she stopped to think, well, the thing I said about Iowa turned out to be embarrassingly wrong. Maybe I ought to go back and re-examine this. Maybe I don't understand it as well as I think I do. You think that's going to happen? That does not happen. I guess probably most of you followed that story about the Rolling Stone article. There was a Rolling Stone article last week that claimed that rural Oklahoma hospitals were overrun by people suffering overdoses of ivermectin. And of course, you can already tell the kind of hay they plan to make out of a story like that, right? That ivermectin is not endorsed by Dr. Fauci. And so anybody taking it is an idiot. And it's probably a proxy for Trump voter. So we can make fun of our political enemies and say, look at these stupid idiots not following the instructions of their betters. And now look what they've gone and done. They've clogged all these hospitals. Even gunshot victims can't get treatment because the beds are all taken by the ivermectin overdosers. Now, of course, this story does not pass anybody's smell test or BS meter. Your BS meter should have smoke coming out of it at this point. This is obviously a false story. You would know that right from the start. And it turns out there was only one source for the story, Dr. Jason McElyea. And the Northeastern Health System in Oklahoma, Northeastern Health System Sequoia, issued this statement. Although Dr. Jason McElyea is not an employee of NHS Sequoia, he is affiliated with a medical staffing group that provides coverage for our emergency room. With that said, Dr. McElyea has not worked at our Salisaw location in over 2 months. NHS Sequoia has not treated any patients due to complications related to taking ivermectin. This includes not treating any patients for ivermectin overdose. All patients visiting our emergency room have received medical attention as appropriate. Our hospital has not had to turn away any patients seeking medical care. And then there was a sheriff, and I can't track it down right now, a statement by some local Oklahoma sheriff, taking issue with the implication that rural Oklahoma is just overwhelmed with gunshot victims. And I think he was recalling how few of them there are. So it's not like there's a big line of gunshot victims waiting for treatment at any given time at Oklahoma hospitals. But this aspect of the story has been ignored by people on all sides of the question. But I noticed it right away that, well, how many gunshot victims really are there in sparsely populated Oklahoma in the rural parts at any given time? I bet not that many. But again, it fits into the stereotype that blue state America has of red state America, that they're a bunch of stupid hicks with their stupid guns, probably shooting at each other. So they don't pause to think maybe there's some absurdity here. On the other hand, let's not kid ourselves. This story should not get by anybody's BS meter. I think even some of the lefties who it looks like fell for it, I think the expression fell for it gives them too much credit. It's like they sat here and rationally evaluated the story and then decided to go with it. And it's not even that they explicitly think this way, but instinctively they think this way. Boy, this story hurts our enemies. Let's run with it. That's what it is. Because you may think, well, how long can this story possibly stay going, right? I mean, at some point, the fraud is going to come through, but by that point, it will have done its job. It will have demonized their enemies, and that's why they do it. And then meanwhile, and this is now we're definitely getting into stuff that I haven't written about, but when you look at how Twitter handled it, it goes to show the unbelievable double standard at work. Because you have Rachel Maddow retweeting this and pushing the story, and an executive producer at MSNBC pushing the story, and not to mention Business Insider, The Hill, major newspapers in the UK, all kinds of sources pushing the story. But Maddow has a gigantic audience, compared to most people. And that tweet just stayed up, and Twitter has not for a second put up any kind of notification about disinformation or missing information or anything like that the way they would for you and me. Joe Bernstein over at BuzzFeed News, who's not exactly a Trumper, to put it mildly, put it this way: this story is wrong. By definition, it's misinformation, and coming from one of the biggest platforms in media. That it's still up on Twitter is a crystal clear example of how big disinfo is a political construction, not an empirical framework. And then Glenn Greenwald put it this way, and this is beautiful. Now, by the way, as I read the words of Glenn Greenwald, I want you to try to imagine a Beltway libertarian speaking this way. All libertarians should speak this way. Now, I don't mean that you're not a good libertarian if you don't, but I do mean that this is the way a libertarian evaluating the situation should be thinking about it. Let me just pause for a minute. A libertarian is absolutely free to think that, for example, Joe Biden is a well-intentioned man who just wants what's best for all of us. There's nothing strictly speaking about libertarianism that forbids that opinion. So I'm not saying you're not a real libertarian if you don't. But what I am saying is you'd have to be pretty vacant if you have the libertarian framework for understanding the world and you walk away thinking Joe Biden just wants what's best for people. I just say you're not a very bright libertarian. So likewise, these Beltway people are not very bright, or at least as likely, they want to be respectable. They want to be quoted in the New York Times. They don't want to be, oh my gosh, do they not want to be considered quote unquote extremists? Why, the extremists are Tom Woods and people like that, and we don't talk to them. Well, thanks, by the way. It saves me some time. So here's Glenn Greenwald. The entire anti-disinformation, anti-extremism industry. First of all, I love that he calls it an industry. Again, David Bose of the Cato Institute, you think he'd ever talk that way? Even though that's exactly what we need right now? So again, Greenwald. The entire anti-disinformation, anti-extremism industry is a gigantic fraud funded by the same tiny handful of billionaires, governments, and NGOs, a scam to control discourse while feigning neutral, non-ideological goals to battle, quote, disinformation. Beautiful. Perfect. Hey, everybody, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor, Skillshare. Let's stop and think for a minute of what a miracle we're looking at now. We take this all for granted because we live in this amazing technological world. But with Skillshare, you have, with one membership at your fingertips, access to thousands and thousands of classes, each of which can enrich your life by helping you get better in some area of creativity where you're already skilled, or it can help you explore something brand new, help you get yourself out of your comfort zone. And I'm talking about topics like illustration, design, photography, animation, productivity, marketing, entrepreneurship, and more. And if you're the sort of person who gets really excited about something like this, and then you start it and you only get 5% of the way through because the thing is so darn big and you have so many demands on your time, that's the beauty of Skillshare. These are micro classes that are super specific, that get right to the point, give you exactly what you need, and get you on your way. Short lessons, hands-on projects, classes designed for real life. You can tap into the creativity we all have inside. Now, for me, I've just started making my way through Greg McKeown's little class, Simple Productivity, How to Accomplish More with Less. Explore your creativity at Skillshare.com/Woods, where our listeners get a 1-month free trial of premium membership. That's 1 month free at Skillshare.com/Woods. Now, meanwhile, there's a place where there isn't really any crazy lunacy, and I want to give a little bit of an update from Sweden. Now, I got an email from a listener in Sweden, and I reproduced that email in my email newsletter. And then I had other people from Sweden say, I just wanted to write to you to affirm that what your friend in Sweden is saying is absolutely correct. The reason Sweden came up was that I wanted to take a trip to Sweden. In fact, I had planned a trip to Sweden for late October of this year. And then suddenly the Swedish government declared that there were people from 7 countries who would not be allowed in until at least October 31st. So I was about a week off. And 2 of those countries are the United States and Israel. Now, I've been told that if I want to, I could fly to Denmark and then take the train to Sweden. I don't really particularly relish that, and it's about a 5-hour ride, and I don't want to do that. But more than that, I mean, I'm sure it would be a very pleasant ride, but that's not how I want to take my trip. But then shortly thereafter, Denmark also closed itself off to Americans because I thought, well, okay, I'll visit Denmark. I can't do that either. I was going to visit Budapest, and Hungary is basically not letting anybody in. So they're just crushing their hospitality industry. So even if you have a negative test or you're in perfect health or you've recovered, doesn't matter. They're just going to destroy their hospitality industry. And that's a country that supposedly has a right-wing leader, who's different from the left. And yeah, this right-wing leader is just destroying a major sector of his country's economy. Yeah, great. That's super. Well, anyway, here's what this correspondent wrote from Stockholm. I've been a regular listener to your podcast since about episode 500, so I would consider myself a big supporter of your work. The entry ban of U.S. citizens is a huge surprise. The Swedish strategy against COVID-19 has so far been very successful, but is thanks not to wisdom, but rather to the gigantic incompetence of the Swedish government. Social democratic leaders are so full of woke, quote, value groundwork, and then he gives me a Swedish word that conveys what he's trying to say, that they can't implement any changes of any kind. And in the case of COVID, that's just perfect. The fact that they managed to implement some random travel ban is most likely just due to some random event in the administration. Personally, I live close to the center of Stockholm, 10 kilometers from downtown, which has been the epicenter of epicenters in this pandemic. For a long period of time in 2020, Sweden had the highest numbers in Europe, and Stockholm had the highest numbers in Sweden. Yet no one in my family or extended family has had the virus, and no one I know of has even been to the hospital due to the virus. I can report from my daily trips to my office downtown via metro or commuter train that about 0 to 1% of Swedes are wearing masks today. The trains are full of people, almost close to pre-corona levels, and the streets, shops, restaurants in Stockholm show zero sign of some pandemic going on. Life is 100% back to normal, as it has almost been the whole time. I leave my kids, ages 9 and 12, at school every day. The school is packed with happy, unmasked children, and the only difference from pre-COVID is that we leave them outside school rather than inside. It is with great sadness that I see the development in some U.S. cities and states, and countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada. I pray to God that your message can help prevent the same development in the U.S., a country I used to love, lived in for 18 months, Boston and San Francisco, and have visited about 25 times. That's a great letter. And then I also got letters from people living in Denmark saying that things are on their way back to normal in Denmark too, that they're discontinuing their Corona Pass system. And it's 99 to 100% back to normal there. But at the same time, Denmark, as opposed to Sweden, there is the feeling, though, that if the numbers should change, the hammer could come right back down again. So who really knows? I am hopeful that by next year I'll be able to visit these places. I would really like to. So it looks like I'll be doing more U.S. travel in the meantime, which is fine. There are places I've been meaning to go to that now I can get to, so it'll be okay. But just when I thought I might be able to resume international travel, they do this to me. I did get to visit early this year the island of St. Lucia, which is not the United States, so I did do a little international travel. And then it seems like international travel, even though it's part of the United States. I also visited the island of St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands at the urging of Tom DiLorenzo. I had been to St. Thomas, but Tom DiLorenzo, your friend, the economist and historian of Lincoln, told me that St. John is just beautiful, and you just got to check it out. St. John is accessible by ferry only. You cannot fly into St. John. You fly into St. Thomas, this is the U.S. Virgin Islands, and you take a ferry over to St. John. And it's got only about 5,000 people living there. And somehow, thanks to tourism, they were able to have a flourishing little society over there. I was there in January. I was there during the January 6th thing. And everybody wanted to know, why am I not commenting on that? Well, I'm in St. John on vacation. I don't want to talk about that. And I'm planning to go there again in January. And so it feels like a foreign country, though. It's very different. And as I recall, I think they do drive on the left in St. John, but the difference is usually in countries where they drive on the left, they've got the steering wheel on the right. But here in St. John, they drive on the left and the steering wheel is on the left. I didn't want to rent a car because I was just afraid I would forget and drive on the wrong side of the road, whatever. So we just took Ubers around the island. Anyway, so there are places you can go, because they have beautiful beaches there. I highly recommend it. Great restaurants, just so much fun. Things are expensive. You go to the convenience store, something that costs you $4 at home is going to cost you $10. So factor that in. But it's well worth it because it has the flavor in some ways of a Caribbean island. It kind of made it seem like, we were faking being out of the U.S. And at one point we looked across and we could see the British Virgin Islands. So we were very close to that. Anyway, let me say another thing I want you to know about. I was a fan of Scott Atlas, and I became more of a fan of Scott Atlas the more the media hated him. And Atlas, of course, as you recall, was brought in much too late to be kind of a contrary voice against the Fauci/Birx line, which obsessed monomaniacally over COVID and didn't bother to think that maybe you might be wrecking societies. Now, I don't rule out that these are sinister people who want that or don't care about that or have some other motive. I don't rule that out. But the point is, the idea of having Scott Atlas present was to bring a more holistic approach to the mitigation efforts. And he did that. And of course, he was ridiculed for that. He's just a radiologist and so on and so forth. Yeah. Okay. But I think he did manage to do some good, but he was just opposed by everybody. Well, he has a book coming out, and I am delighted about that. We found out right here on the Tom Woods Show from Jay Bhattacharya months and months ago before anybody else knew he was writing a book. In fact, I said to Bhattacharya, I'm sure you know him for the professor of medicine at Stanford, who is one of the three drafters of the Great Barrington Declaration. I said, he really needs to write a book and tell all and name names and talk about his time in the White House and what really happened. And Bhattacharya said, well, I'm happy to tell you he is writing that book, and it's going to be great. It's coming out November 23rd. It's already available for pre-order, and it's called A Plague Upon Our House. It's got the White House on the cover. My fight at the Trump White House to stop COVID from destroying America. Now, make sure you understand what he means there. He's not one of these zero COVID people, living on some other planet where he's claiming that he's going to stop COVID through mitigation efforts and so forth. Although, of course, he did think that prioritizing seniors made sense. I mean, obviously, there are some sensible things you can do. But to stop it from destroying America, what he's getting at there is that it's entirely within our power to modify how we respond to the virus. COVID doesn't have to destroy America. Only we can destroy America in how we respond to it. Let me read to you the summary that's on the pre-order page. What really happened behind the scenes at the Trump White House during the COVID pandemic? When Dr. Scott W. Atlas was tapped by Donald Trump to join his COVID task force, he was immediately thrust into a maelstrom of scientific disputes, policy debates, raging egos, politically motivated lies, and cynical media manipulation. Numerous myths and distortions surround the Trump administration's handling of the crisis, and many pressing questions remain unanswered. Did the Trump team really bungle the response to the pandemic? Were the right decisions made about travel restrictions, lockdowns, and mask mandates? Are doctors Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx competent medical experts or time-serving bureaucrats? Oh boy. Did 500,000 people really die unnecessarily because of Trump's incompetence? So far, no trusted figure has emerged who can tell the story straight until now. In this unfiltered insider account, Dr. Scott Atlas brings us directly into the White House, describes the key players in the crisis, and assigns credit and blame where it is deserved. The book includes shocking evaluations of the task force members' limited knowledge and grasp of the science of COVID, and details heated discussions with task force members, including all of the most controversial episodes that dominated headlines for weeks. Dr. Atlas tells the truth about the science and documents the media's relentless campaign to suffocate it, which included canceled interviews, journalists' off-camera hostility in the White House briefings, and intentional distortion of facts. He also provides an inside account of the delays and timelines involving vaccines and other treatments, evaluates the impact of the lockdowns on American public health, and indicts the relentless war on truth waged by big business and big tech. No other book contains these revelations. Millions of people who trust Dr. Atlas will want to read this dramatic account of what really went on behind the scenes in the White House during the greatest public health crisis of the 21st century. Well, I definitely want to read that, that's for sure. I'm glad that's going to appear. It's being published by something called Bombardier Books, which does not sound like a mainstream press to me, which is very, very strange. You would think that Atlas could have gotten a major publisher, but who knows in this day and age, where dissident voices are not exactly welcomed with open arms. I mean, who really knows? Maybe not. And then finally, our friend Jordan Schachtel, who's writing on this, I love very much and whom I've had on the show before, wrote something today that I kind of liked. He said, imagine being the guy who has to put together the Global Freedom Index this year. We've talked about that a little bit before. There are various institutes that put out economic freedom indexes. I think the Heritage Foundation, Fraser Institute in Canada. And they look at the countries of the world and they rank them from the most free to the least free. And Jordan says, imagine being the guy who has to put together the Global Freedom Index this year. All of a sudden, you're struggling to decide if Afghanistan or Australia is right now the freer country. We laugh because what else can we do, ladies and gentlemen? What else can we do? Well, one thing you can do is to forget your sorrows and the frustrations for a brief moment by joining me at my 2000th episode event, where we're going to have so much darn fun. October 16th, it doesn't even cost anything. And I have had people saying to me, if you just charged $5 a piece, you'd make a lot of money. But it doesn't cost you a thing. We're going to have a lot of fun. It is going to cost me a thing, but I'm doing this as a gift to you folks who have sustained me as a podcaster now for going on 8 years. In a couple of weeks from now, it will be 8 years of the Tom Woods Show. And I obviously couldn't have done it without people listening. So my gift to you is what is going to be a night of hilarity and entertainment and fellowship and fun and goodwill and making new friends and meeting new people and just having a great time. If you're thinking, I don't have anybody to go with, you are going to be in a room filled with friends you haven't met yet. Do not let that hold you back. If you have nobody to go with, you're going to make instant friends at this thing, because we all are dying to meet people who think the way we do. And you're going to have a room full of thousands of them. So go to the Tom Woods Show 2000th episode event. So much fun we're going to have. Check out the details at tomwoods2000.com. Not tomwoods.com/2000. tomwoods2000.com. Now, if you're a nerd and you're counting ahead and saying, well, wait a minute, by the time we get to October 16th, we'll be a few episodes shy of episode 2000. Yeah, that's true. But episode 2000 is going to require a little video work and whatever to get it ready for publication. So this is just the way I want it. I need a little bit of time with the raw material to make it look nice and get it ready to be published. So tomwoods2000.com is where you should go, especially those of you who haven't really considered it up to now. Think about it. Do it. It's going to be great. Anyway, that's it. tomwoods2000.com. I'll see you tomorrow for our September 11th episode.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit tomwoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.
Like the sound of the Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.